Aquarius. There are evenings when everything seems to move as usual, and yet, somewhere inside you, something softens just a little. Not because of anything obvious, nothing you can clearly point to. Just a subtle feeling. Like something is shifting, very gently, in a space you haven't quite found the words for yet. You're still you, still thoughtful, still observant, still keeping just enough distance. But a little deeper now. There's a part of you that seems to be listening more than before. And then, in the middle of those ordinary moments, you begin to notice there's a different kind of energy moving closer, not rushing, not trying to be seen, just present. A little younger in its feel, a little softer in its approach. And what's interesting is, you're not searching for it, yet somehow you can still feel it. Maybe it isn't just one person. Maybe it's several connections, quietly unfolding, each in their own way. And if you've been wondering lately why your emotions feel a little different, in ways that are hard to explain, maybe this story begins right there. There are moments when life keeps moving just like any other day. No special messages, no memorable encounters, no events big enough to name. And yet, somewhere deep inside, you begin to notice. You're not quite in the same place anymore. Not exactly sad, not exactly happy. Just a very subtle shift. Like the surface of the water looks still, but underneath, a quiet wave has just passed through. And what makes you pause isn't that it's clear, it's that it's so hard to explain. You, an Aquarius who's used to observing, used to understanding things through logic, used to questioning before believing, now find yourself standing in front of a feeling with no data, no proof, and yet, it feels real enough that you can't ignore it. Maybe you tried to brush it aside, telling yourself, you're probably just overthinking things. But then, it comes back. Not strong, not overwhelming, just there. Like a door that's been left slightly open, no one calling your name, no one urging you forward, and still, if you step closer, you might see something. There's something interesting about intuition. It rarely arrives with noise. It doesn't compete for attention. It doesn't try to prove itself. It simply stays, quietly present, waiting for the moment you become still enough to notice. And maybe this is one of those moments. You start paying attention to the smallest details. A passing glance that lingers in your mind longer than it should. A sense of familiarity with someone you don't really know. A soft kind of alignment. You can't explain where it comes from, but it's not easy to dismiss. Not everything needs a reason to exist. Not every connection begins with clarity. Sometimes, things begin as something barely there. And yet, that very vagueness is what makes it feel most real in the beginning. And maybe what you're experiencing right now isn't something big in an obvious, dramatic way. It's simply a very gentle shift in the way you feel the world. A quiet opening in the way you receive people. You don't have to understand it yet. You don't have to define it. Just recognize this. You felt it. And that alone already carries a meaning of its own. Because in life, not everything that comes to you needs to be explained right away. Some things arrive first, just for you to feel. And only later, when the time is right, their meaning slowly reveals itself. And who knows, this very subtle feeling you've been carrying lately might just be the beginning of something you never thought you'd pay attention to. When you hear the words younger energy, it's easy to think in numbers, someone younger in age, a clear gap written down on paper. But what's touching you right now may not be about age at all. It's in the way someone moves through the world, lighter, less guarded, not carrying as many layers of protection that life often teaches us to build. And you notice it, not through what they say, but through how they are. A gaze that doesn't scan or judge, a smile that doesn't need a reason. A way of listening that doesn't rush to interrupt with their own story. And in that moment, you begin to realize there's a part of you that used to feel the same way. A version of you that once saw the world with more curiosity than caution. A version of you that stepped into connection without needing to calculate the outcome. It's not that you lost it. It's just that, over time, you learned how to protect yourself better. You learned how to read signals, how to keep a healthy distance, how not to place too much expectation on things that aren't clear yet. And none of that is wrong. It helped you move through a lot. It kept you grounded in moments that asked you to be careful. But then, when a different kind of energy appears, someone who carries a softness, a simpler way of approaching things, you don't just see them. You see a reflection of yourself, not to pull you backward, not to make you return to who you were, but to remind you that part of you is still there, still capable of feeling that way, if you allow it. That younger energy doesn't make you smaller. It doesn't place you in a weaker position. If anything, it feels like a fresh breeze, moving through spaces inside you that you once believed were closed. And there's no need to rush to define what this connection is. No need to ask where it's going or how long it might last. Just notice this. When two different energies meet, something always shifts. Sometimes it's not about moving toward them. It's about you, reopening a part of yourself you once chose to set aside. And if you stay with that awareness just a little longer, you may begin to see this difference isn't pulling you away from who you are. It's gently reminding you that you are more layered than you thought. And somewhere within you, there is still a part that's alive, open, and ready to connect, simply waiting for the right kind of energy to reach it. Some connections don't begin with words. They don't need a long conversation. They don't even need an introduction. Just a very brief moment. When two sets of eyes meet by chance and then linger a little longer than expected. Not long enough to call it familiarity, but not so quick that it can be dismissed as nothing. You might not notice it right away, but later, when everything is already past, you find yourself remembering it, naturally, not because you tried to hold on to it, but because it stayed. There's something about moments like that that doesn't need explanation. It's not a clear signal, not a statement of anything certain, just a very quiet realization that someone saw you in a way that didn't feel like everyone else. And what makes it stay with you isn't how long the glance lasted. It's what it left behind. A slight sense of confusion, a soft curiosity, and a small, quiet pause. As if your mind is trying to understand what your heart already felt. You don't go looking for moments like this. You're not standing there waiting for someone to notice you. You're not trying to create anything. And yet, it still happens. As if some connections don't need planning, don't need perfect timing. Just two people sharing the same space, and for a brief second, both open enough to recognize something. Maybe after that moment, everything returns to normal. No greeting, no clear next step, and still, the feeling remains, and sometimes the things left unspoken carry the most meaning. Not because they are grand, but because they are real in a way that's hard to name. You don't have to understand it right away. You don't have to decide whether it means something. Just allow this. In a world where everything is often explained too clearly, there are still moments that exist in silence, and yet are deep enough to touch you. And then, after those moments that are so hard to name, you begin to notice something. This feeling isn't coming from just one person. It's like standing in a familiar space, and somehow the light feels slightly different today. Nothing obvious has changed, and yet, the way you experience everything is no longer the same. You may start to realize there's more than one presence touching your life right now, each in a different way. One person brings a sense of ease. Around them, you don't feel the need to become someone else. You don't have to explain yourself. You just get to be there, to breathe, to exist as the simplest version of you. Another person makes you think more deeply, not in a way that drains you, but in a subtle, almost quiet way, as if they're reaching into layers within you that you don't often let people see. They make you question things, not about them, but about yourself. And then there's someone else, not particularly intense, not overwhelming, but somehow they make you smile, effortlessly. No reason, no context, just a presence gentle enough to soften a long day. Maybe, at some point, you believed that the right connection had to be clear, strong, and singular. But now, things seem to be unfolding differently. There isn't just one story. There isn't just one path. There are multiple currents, flowing side by side in your life, and each one carries something of its own. Not all of them will lead to the same place. Not everyone will stay. But that doesn't take away from what they bring, because sometimes Someone enters your life not to stay forever, but to awaken a certain feeling within you. Someone else appears to offer a new perspective, and there are those who simply pass through, but leave behind a warmth you'll remember later. Not every connection is meant to be held on to. Not every feeling is meant to be followed all the way through, but every presence is a mirror, reflecting you in different moments, in different versions of yourself. You may see yourself in someone's gentleness, see yourself in the depth of another's questions, and see yourself in the simplest smiles you hadn't noticed in a long time. And as you begin to look at things this way, you start to understand life isn't just bringing you one person. It's opening a wider space for you to connect, to feel, and to understand yourself more clearly. There's no need to choose right away, no need to compare. Just stay present long enough to notice what each connection brings. Because maybe what truly matters isn't who stays in the end, but this, through meeting different people along the way, you're slowly beginning to see yourself more clearly than ever before. And as all of these presences begin to unfold around you, you start to notice a very subtle shift within yourself. Not in what's happening outside, but in the way you respond to it. An earlier version of you might have paused to analyze, weighing everything carefully, asking who fits and who doesn't, who should come closer, and who should remain at a safe distance. You were good at reading situations, quick to see what could happen next, and in many ways, that protected you. It helped you avoid things that didn't feel right. But at times, it also made you tired, because not everything needs to be figured out right away. Not every feeling needs a conclusion, and somewhere along the way, not a clear moment, not a specific turning point, something in you began to change, not in a dramatic way, not all at once, but in a quiet, deeper softening. You still observe, but you no longer rush to assign meaning. You still feel. But you no longer try to control the outcome. There's a new kind of space opening inside you, wide enough to let things exist without needing to define them too quickly. You don't ask as often, where is this going? Instead, you find yourself wondering, what is this feeling trying to show me? And that shift, as small as it may seem, changes everything. Because when you stop trying to control everything, you become easier to be around. Not because you open yourself to everyone, but because you no longer close yourself off too quickly. You give things time. You allow people to be who they are, without needing them to immediately fit into a certain idea of yours. And what's interesting is, that very lack of urgency becomes its own kind of attraction, not loud, not attention-seeking, but a steady presence, one that makes others feel at ease around you. They don't have to try to be a better version of themselves. They don't have to impress you. They can just be. And in a world where people are often trying so hard, that becomes something rare. You didn't change to become more attractive. You simply came closer to yourself, less guarded, less reactive in old, familiar ways, and more present in each moment. You may not notice it right away, but the people around you, they do. They feel the calm in the way you listen, the softness in the way you respond, and something real, not forced, not performed. And maybe this shift within you right now isn't just changing how you see the world, it's quietly changing how the world sees you back. And as you're no longer reacting the way you used to, a different rhythm begins to enter your life, slower, softer, and somehow a little harder to grasp. No one is rushing toward you. There are no signals so clear that you feel forced to decide right away. Nothing is being pushed forward, no pressure to define the connection, no urgency to hold on to something before it disappears. Just things unfolding. In their own way, messages come and go. Conversations reach a point that feels just enough. Moments of connection don't always last long. And still, they leave behind a very soft echo. You don't try to extend it, and it seems neither do they. Not because there's no interest, but because both of you are moving in your own rhythm, a rhythm that doesn't need to rush. It's like listening to a slow piece of music, where the silence between the notes matters just as much as the sound itself. These connections seem to move in that same way, not always complete, not always clear, and yet They carry a depth you rarely find in things that move too fast. You may begin to notice each person is approaching you differently. Some stay at a distance, simply observing. Some come a little closer, then pause. Some are just there, not doing much and still holding a steady presence. And you, for the first time in a long while, don't feel the need to adjust any of it. No need to push things forward. No need to pull anything closer. No need to create distance. Just letting everything find its place. There's a quiet kind of maturity in the way you're holding this now. You no longer see slowness as uncertainty. You no longer rush to fill in the gaps with assumptions. Instead, you begin to see those gaps as part of the process. Not everything needs to be completed right away. Not every connection needs to be defined early. Some connections only begin to carry meaning when they're given time, to grow naturally without pressure. And within that space, you are changing too. You're learning to stay with uncertainty without feeling unsettled. You're learning to trust your experience even when there's no clear answer yet. You're learning to let things be what they are, not perfect, not complete, but real enough to exist. And maybe this is something rare, to be in a phase where everything is opening, but nothing has fully closed, to be in a space where you feel more than you understand. And instead of trying to escape that in-between, you choose to stay long enough to listen, to observe, to feel, because you're beginning to see. It's in these unhurried moments that things are truly taking shape. And then, after you've stayed long enough in the slow rhythm of these connections, something else begins to come into focus, not outside of you, but within. At first, it's easy to think that all of this is happening because of the people entering your life, because they carry a different energy, because they show up in new ways, because they make you feel something you didn't feel before. But if you take a step back, just for a moment, and look a little deeper, you may begin to see it's not them changing everything. It's you, who is no longer in the same place. There are small shifts that happen so quietly, you may not have noticed them as they were unfolding. The way you listen a little longer now, the way you don't rush to react when something feels unclear, the way you allow a feeling to exist without needing to explain it right away. You're no longer seeking connection from a place that needs to be filled. There's no longer that sense that someone has to be there to make you feel complete. Instead, there's a quiet sense of wholeness forming within you. Not perfect, not constant, but enough that you no longer feel the need to rush. Enough that you no longer have to hold on to something just to feel steady. And when you begin to connect from a place like that, everything around you begins to shift as well. The people who come closer are no longer drawn to a sense of lack. They're not there to complete you, and you don't need them to do that. Instead, they arrive as whole individuals, carrying their own stories, their own rhythm, their own way of being. You don't need them to become part of you, and they don't need you to become someone else. Two forms of wholeness, meeting in a quiet space where there is no demand, no control, only presence. And that alone creates a completely different quality in the way connections feel. Lighter, more real, less pressure. You can sense it in the simplest moments. A conversation doesn't have to last long, and still, you feel connected. A silence no longer feels uncomfortable. It becomes a space you can rest in. A distance doesn't create doubt. It gives you time to return to yourself. And what's worth noticing is, you didn't try to create any of this. It happened, naturally, as if when something shifted within you, everything aligned with that shift began to appear. No need to search too hard. No need to push anything forward. Just by staying true to where you are, what fits finds its way to you. You may not fully understand why you've changed like this, but you can feel it, in the way you're calmer with uncertainty, in the way you're no longer pulled into emotional extremes, in the way you choose to stay with yourself, instead of chasing an outcome. And maybe, this is one of the most important shifts you've gone through, not who is coming into your life, but how you receive them, not how many connections are opening, but the quality of those connections. And all of it begins within you, in the way you learn to stand steady without needing to hold on, in the way you open your heart without losing yourself. And maybe the people showing up in your life right now aren't just part of a new chapter. They might also be a quiet sign that you've stepped into a different version of yourself. And then, after everything that has been quietly unfolding, a very natural question may begin to rise within you. Where is this going? And this time, you don't rush to answer it, not because you don't care, but because you no longer need an immediate answer just to feel at ease. There's a calmness, a quiet, unfamiliar calm that is slowly becoming your new normal. You don't have to decide right now. You don't have to choose who will stay. You don't have to understand everything that's happening just to allow yourself to keep moving forward. Because maybe, for the first time in a long while, you're experiencing a phase where the value doesn't lie in the outcome, but in the feeling you carry through each moment, the feeling of connection without being bound, the feeling of being seen without needing to explain too much, the feeling of being yourself without having to adjust to fit into someone else's space. And maybe that's a very quiet kind of freedom. Not freedom in the sense of separation, but freedom within connection, while still remaining whole inside yourself. You begin to understand. Not every journey needs a clear ending to be meaningful. Some phases are simply meant to be felt, to feel how you are changing, to feel how others are entering your life, to feel how everything is connecting in its own natural way. You're no longer forcing things to become something, no longer setting invisible timelines, no longer trying to define something that is still unfolding, just allowing connections to be what they are, allowing emotions to exist without needing control, allowing yourself to remain open without losing your inner steadiness. And most importantly, you're still there. You don't lose yourself in anyone else. You don't trade your peace for something uncertain. You open your heart, but you don't drift away from yourself. You feel, but you don't force any outcome to happen. And within all of this, all the people, all the glances, all the connections slowly taking shape, you remain the quiet center of your own world, a place of grounding that doesn't need validation, a place steady enough for you to return to whenever you need. And maybe that is what truly matters in this entire journey, not who stays, not what happens next, but this: you've learned how to exist in a moving world while still holding a deep stillness within. And if you find yourself in a phase like this, where nothing is fully clear, and yet everything feels just enough to be real, maybe you don't have to rush. You don't have to find the answer today. You don't have to understand everything to keep going. Just trust this. What is coming into your life right now carries its own meaning, even if it hasn't been named yet. And while everything is still forming, you can choose to stay with yourself, to listen, to feel in your own way. Because sometimes the most meaningful journey is not the one that leads you to someone else. It's the one that brings you back closer to yourself,